Significant developments in Ukraine. Fighters there have surrendered from Mariupol's last pocket of resistance. You'll remember the absolute bitter fight that's been put up at the Azovstal steelwork. Nearly 3 months after the invasion of Ukraine, Russia is finally sealing, I guess we could describe it as its sort of first major trophy in the war.
Yeah, this follows reports that Ukraine soldiers were ordered by their own leaders to stand down from the fighting and leave the city.
And to bring us up to date with the latest, we can cross live and speak to Major General Chip Chapman. Thank you very much for speaking to us this morning. How significant a loss is this for Ukraine to finally surrender that steelworks?
Well, tactical battle is a sequence to support operational objectives to further strategic ends. So from a Russian perspective, this joins the Donbass through Crimea with a land corridor. So that is significant as an objective for the Russians. But of course, they've also got an open flank there, which can still be attacked where the red ends as such on the north of that flank. I think the significance, though, is more on the Ukrainian side, because firstly, it is to do with the magnificent defence there. And secondly, this would have been more impactful if it had happened 30 odd days ago. So phase 2 of Russian operations, when they caved in the northern operation, really commenced around the 25th of April. They really needed to take Mariupol before the 25th of April if they were going to do an operational level military operation. That is either a double envelopment from the north and the south, with Mariupol being the shoulder, or a encirclement. They couldn't do that, and therefore they were 30 days behind. So it's that which has bought the Ukrainians time for their counteroffensives in the north. And of course, Kyiv and Kharkiv have been relieved. So we've got this success of the Ukrainians in the north, and the Russians having a kind of 5 out of 10 really in the south. And that is going to be the dilemma for the Ukrainians in the future of how do they dislodge the Russians in the south, or is it that they have to accept something there, which they don't want to do, which sets the conditions for a future ceasefire?
How likely do you think it is, Chip, that the Russians potentially may push further west along that southern corridor towards Odessa?
Yeah, that's true. So Kherson, it looks like, will have some sort of integration or annexation in the Russian plan. And to get towards Odessa, you need to take Mykolaiv, which they've been probing towards. I don't think they've got the combat power to do that. And I don't think Odessa is under threat, because the trying to do an amphibious operation when we've already seen the Neptune missiles take out the Moskva would make that a very, very high-risk operation at the moment. But in terms of the strategic aim of Russia, that would still be one of the things, because I do think they still want to try and join up that corridor through Odessa, potentially towards Transnistria. So in grand strategic objectives, the long term, and those things can last centuries, that is still a Russian objective. Do I think that is achievable in the next month, 2 months, 3 months? Absolutely not.
Where does our involvement fall with this? I mean, Liz Truss's front page of the Daily Telegraph this morning saying we'll give weapons to Moldova to try and stop Putin. That does mark a bit of a gear change in terms of our long-term investment in this battle.
Well, I think the real long-term investment is if Ukraine lose, then we're in a different geopolitical and geostrategic situation. So it is absolutely vital that the West, which is still unified at the moment, does provide that. And of course, the significance really is not with the amount that the UK gives, even though that is large, but it's the sort of $40 billion worth of humanitarian and military aid which the Americans voted on Thursday. If we don't support the Ukrainians, then they'll never be able to have the counteroffensive to try and drive them out. I think there are at least 4 problems for the Ukrainians, of which the fourth is the most significant. The first one is the blockade, because that impacts everyone. So they can't get the grain out, and the West would like to see that go out. The second one is this progressive destruction of the infrastructure of Ukraine. So there does come a point, not yet, when they might want to have a peace, but it's not the better peace which they seek. The third one is the logistic support for the Ukrainians. We don't know much about. We know it's bad for the Russians. But the fourth one, which is this geostrategic and geopolitical one, is a timid West again, sort of appeasing the Russians. And that is about the worst thing we can do. We don't support the Ukrainians. The Ukraine is finished as a nation, and that is why we really do need to support them still.
I was just wondering if you'd seen these comments, Chip, from Derek Chollet. He's the most senior advisor to the US Secretary of State, saying that the UK's dispute with the EU over the Northern Ireland Protocol could risk unity in the West when it comes to Ukraine. He's kind of tying these two things together. Is he onto something there, or is that stretching things a bit?
I think that's stretching things a lot. I mean, the Good Friday Agreement, of course, is 25 years old, and to suggest that there'll be some sort of friction which goes back to war when you've only got really micro-terrorism from distant Republican groups in Northern Ireland is really stretching it. It's a lack of understanding of both the politics of the North and South Ireland and the Good Friday Agreement, when most people voted for that in the late 90s.
Let's just talk very briefly, if we can, about the expansion of NATO. Currently, a sticking point there is Turkey looking like it's going to hold it up. Of course, every single current member of NATO has to approve a new member. Could this pose a problem?
I don't think so. I think that is transactional from a Turkish point of view. So the Turks have always had a problem with the Kurdish problem, and this really plays into the support of Sweden in particular for the PKK, which is one of the groups that they see as a terrorist group. Of course, that is one of the groups also that we use in Syria as a proxy through the Syria Democratic Force. So I think that is there as a transactional thing, which will be unlocked in negotiations, and that is what diplomacy is all about.
Chip, really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much for speaking to us so early on a Saturday morning. That is Major General Chip Chapman, former Head of Counter-Terrorism at the Ministry of Defence.